It's time for the Alien Conspiracy Podcast. We are your hosts, Agent ETA
and Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can follow the show on Twitter at AlienConPod. We also have an email address, alienconpod@protonmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And don't forget to check out all of our other wonderful links in the description on Linktree. This week's episode, Double Header. All right, this time we've got two wonderful topics coming at you. We had a rare tie on our Discord. As you may know, if you listen to the show, people on Discord can vote. Patreon. People on Patreon can vote for next week's topic. And this time there was a tie between Project Bluebeam and the Betty Andreasson abduction, which was suggested. The Betty Andreasson abduction was suggested by Agent Brazel. So thanks for the suggestion, Agent Brazel. So we had a tie, and I figured, what the hell? Let's just do a double header. Let's do a podcast where we talk about both at once. Not that big of a deal.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so let's get into it. First up, Project Bluebeam. This is a fun one. Have you do you know anything about this one, Agent ETA?
I actually don't. The Betty Andreasson, or how do you pronounce her name? Andreasson?
I think Andreasson, something like that.
Something like, yeah. Yeah, that's the only one that I did any research on, to be quite honest.
Okay.
So Bluebeam will be a new one for me.
Excuse me, just taking a drink of water there. All right, so anyways, Project Bluebeam. Now, this is a very popular theory, and pieces of this theory have actually sort of trickled down or up, whichever you prefer, into just sort of pop culture in general. Like, this one it's kind of surprising at just how much it's permeated, you know, the thing in general, I guess. I'm not sure how to describe it, but yeah, it's sort of a major one in that way, but when you get down to it, it gets pretty interesting. So let's get down to it. This is one that originated in 1994. A gentleman by the name of Sergei Monsat published an essay titled NASA's Project Bluebeam. And this guy he's a Canadian, and he was like a separatist, and he had his own stuff going on. We won't get into all that, but he lays out Project Bluebeam, that he says there are 4 steps to the project, with the ultimate goal to, this is a quote, implement the New Age religion with the Antichrist at its head. And he says, without a universal belief in the New Age religion, the success of the New World Order will be impossible. Now, according to Mr. Monast, M-O-N-A-S-T. So according to Mr. Monast, there are multiple steps or stages to this project. So step 1 is engineered earthquakes and hoax discoveries. So the first part, there will be a breakdown in archaeological knowledge used to disprove religions. And I guess the idea is that earthquakes will be used to destroy current archaeological wonders of the world or discoveries or locations. And then once those are gone, they will hoax new archaeological discoveries to disprove current ideas. And he says in there that movies like 2001, Independence Day, the Star Trek series, and some other ones have laid the foundations. The central theme is that humanity is coming together to repel an outside force. You know, think Independence Day, for example. So that's leading, he's saying that sort of the movies are laying the foundation, the cultural foundation for people to be ready to believe this stuff. His essay is really hard to summarize because it's pretty wild stuff. So I'll do some excerpts here. So he says, hoaxed discoveries. What is important to understand in the first step is that those earthquakes will hit at different parts of the world where scientific and archaeological teachings have indicated that arcane mysteries have been buried. By those types of earthquakes, it will be possible for scientists to rediscover those arcane mysteries, which will be used to discredit all fundamental religious doctrines. This is the first preparation for the plan for humanity because what they want to do is destroy the beliefs of all Christians and Muslims on the planet. To do that, they need some false proof from the far past that will prove to all nations that their religions have all been misinterpreted and misunderstood. So I read that, I'm kind of like, huh? Like, that's what I mean. It's kind of hard to summarize what he's saying in this essay. Now, you can go to an awful lot of websites, articles, YouTube videos, on and on and on. It never ends with this stuff. But I went to the original essay because I was looking at different, like a wide variety of sources, and they contradicted each other. So I figured, let's go straight to the source and see what the source has to say. And the reason why everybody contradicts each other is because the source is about as clear as mud, as you can see. All right, now step 2 is the big space show in the sky. So this step is to put on a gigantic space show using 3-dimensional optical holograms projected from satellites all over the world. And here's a quote. "Where does the space show come from? The space show, the holographic images, will be used in a simulation of the ending during which all nations will be shown scenes that will be the fulfillment of that which they desire to verify the prophecies and adversary events. These will be projected from satellites onto the sodium layer about 60 miles above the Earth. We see tests every once in a while, but they are called UFOs and flying saucers sightings." So he's saying that UFOs and flying saucers in general, they're just tests. They're not actual aliens. They're just tests of this holographic system, which kind of interesting since sightings go back a long time, even thousands of years. So I don't know, kind of weird. But anyway, so the space show will show us the new Messiah, a God that will speak all languages, and it will be different depending on the culture. So, in one place, they would be expecting Jesus, so that's what they'll see. In another place where perhaps they would be more comfortable seeing Buddha rather than Jesus in the sky, that's what it will be. That's sort of the idea he's suggesting here. And he says that they will use enough truth to convince even the most learned of the deception. So he's not real specific on how that happens. He just says that he's going to sprinkle in enough truth to convince everybody. It's going to mix truth and deception, which we all know that's a well-used tactic.
Oh, yeah.
At least anybody who listens to this show, if you're familiar with what we've done in the past, that's a pretty common theme. All right, now some point during... Oh, yeah, go ahead, ETA.
Well, I was just gonna say we learned that pretty well when we were looking into Snowden.
Oh yeah, the art of deception, baby.
That was a rabbit hole. That was a big one.
Yeah, I thought, we'll just go over the slideshow. It'll be like, we'll be done in like half an hour. Oh boy, was I wrong.
Didn't we end up? We could have made a couple episodes out of that for sure.
No, that was 3
we were
episodes.
Sitting there trying to. Yeah. Well, I meant to say a couple more.
Oh yeah, we could have.
Even though
yeah.
I was gonna say, even though we made 3 episodes out of it, it's just like you could sit there and analyze each slide, and like you can almost make an episode out of each slide, almost. I mean, well, if you wanted to, you definitely could. But yeah, dude, that was a really. I was very confused when researching some of that stuff because like you're looking at the slides and you have to have researched different things, and sometimes it's just like, what the hell did I get myself into,
Yeah. What am I looking at? This shit is crazy. Yeah, we did do the first episode of that. We did twice, actually, because remember, Agent Orange was with us, and then he couldn't make it for the other two. So we're like, well, maybe we should just redo it without him. Maybe I'll release that first one on Patreon because I think Agent Orange is really, really hilarious, and I think it might be entertaining for some people. I don't know. But
yeah, it'd be great to get him back one day.
yeah, it'd be nice. All right. So during the project at some point, Project Bluebeam, they're going to use a tractor beam, like, in sci-fi when they use a tractor beam to grab onto stuff. They'll use that to lift up enormous amounts of people to fake the rapture, kind of like how Christians are expecting the rapture. And it sort of seemed like, so devout Christians they're not gonna fall for the Antichrist. They're going to be wise to that. They're going to be, their faith is going to be good, and they're not going to be suckered into that kind of thing. So these people, we're just going to suck them up with a tractor beam and get rid of them because we don't want them. They're not going to fall for the plan. They're not going to worship the Antichrist. So get them out of here. It doesn't say what's going to happen to them after the tractor beam gets them, but you can imagine it's probably not going to be good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now
they gone.
As part of this, the projections that I mentioned earlier, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Krishna, whoever that they're projecting in the sky, depending on the local culture, those are all going to merge into one God. And this new God is going to be the Antichrist, which I'm wondering how the Antichrist fits in to, I don't know, Hindu religion or whatever, but let's not worry about that right now. It's the Antichrist. Now,
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Now, this new Antichrist will explain the various scriptures have been misunderstood, and old religions are responsible for turning brother against brother. In the sense I get is like brother, not necessarily like literal brothers, but actual just people against people. Because we're all kind of brothers if you think about it. I think he's, that's what he's sort of suggesting. But anyways, here's another quote, because again, this stuff is really hard to, paraphrase. Naturally, this superbly staged falsification will result in dissolved social and religious disorder on a grand scale, each nation blaming the other for the deception, setting loose millions of programmed religious fanatics through the demonic possession on a scale never witnessed before. In addition, this event will occur at a time of profound worldwide political anarchy and general tumult created by some worldwide catastrophe. The United Nations, even now, plans to use Beethoven's Song of Joy as the anthem for the introduction for the new age one world religion. So, all right, that's some pretty wild stuff there, man. And he doesn't explain why they would use Beethoven's Song of Joy. And it's a nice song. It's a good song. I like that song. But does that song, would that work for people in other countries who are not as familiar with European music?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a fair question to ask. But and so far, at least, like the way this is being described, like it sounds like the way he's talking is from like a Western perspective or a Judeo-Christian perspective. Some of the words that he's using, like, well, for example, Antichrist.
Yeah.
That figure, that Antichrist figure, isn't present in all religions. So how would, I don't know, that a lot of it, kind of doesn't make sense. But I mean, I digress.
Oh, that doesn't make sense. Okay, well, just hold on to your butts because it gets better. So I have another quote here for step 3. Again, reading through this, I'm like, huh? I don't know. What the fuck is he even talking about here? So I just did a quote here because maybe you, dear listener, can help me understand this. So step 3 is the advancement of techniques propel us toward the third step in the Blue Beam project that goes along with the telepathic and electronically augmented two-way communication where ELF, VLF, and LF waves will reach each person from within his or her own mind, convincing each of them that their own God is speaking to them from the very depths of their own soul. Such rays from satellites are fed from the memories of computers that have stored massive data about every human on Earth and their languages. The rays will then interlace with their natural thinking to form what we call diffuse artificial thought. There's a lot to unpack there, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, ELF, VLF, and LF, those are radio waves, frequencies. Those are bouncing around all the time. How they could use that to control people's minds, unclear. But the idea here is that they're going to get you to think things that you don't even know that aren't even your own thoughts, right? They're just going to control you remotely and get you to do stuff that's against your will, but you don't even know it's against your will, is sort of how I think it is. How I kind of look at that, like with their natural thinking to form what we call diffuse artificial thought. I don't know. That's what I sort of think that means, but that's a lot of this stuff is vague enough to where you can interpret it to however whatever you think it means. It could mean that,
Uh-huh. And it would take quite a bit of effort, resources, and technology to accomplish any of this, really. And it's like, does he mention, and maybe I'm getting too far ahead here, does he mention like who's behind this, supposedly?
NASA.
Oh, that's, goddamn, idiot.
Well,
NASA ain't got that kind of resources, man.
It's being done through NASA, but it's sort of like the New World Order is doing it, right?
Yeah, okay. The globalists.
Yeah, the globalists. He doesn't say who those people are specifically, just this shady cabal of New World Order, globalist type, world domination, that sort of a thing. But he's not more specific than that. So
okay,
under this new system with mind control, orbital mind control lasers, as if you prefer, nobody will be allowed to have an individual personality. At some point, we will all just sort of be machines or robots, just will have to go along, and anybody that dissenters, they will be sent to UN eradication camps, these sort of concentration camps. So anyways, that's another way of saying that if you don't go along with it, or somehow you're able to break free of this mind control, you'll just be murdered, basically. Now, he does tie this into Project MK Ultra, and he quotes, or a quote from the essay, in his book, The Body Electric, Nobel Prize nominee Dr. Robert O. Becker describes a series of experiments conducted in the early 1960s by Alan Free, where this phenomena was demonstrated, as well as later experiments conducted in 1973 at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research by Dr. Joseph C. Sharp, who personally underwent tests in which he proved he could hear and understand messages delivered to him in an echo-free isolation chamber via a pulsed microwave audiogram, which is an analog of the world's sound vibration beamed into his brain. Becker then goes on to state, such a device has obvious application for covert operations designed to drive a target crazy with unknown voices or deliver undetectable instructions to a programmed assassin. So, yeah, I mean, that's stuff that was probably, I'd have to look it up. I didn't look it up in this case, but he might be referencing like real studies and stuff, but it sounds very speculative, like this should be able to use in this capacity, but we haven't deployed it in that capacity yet. So more,
it's pretty far out there.
Yep. So more MK Ultra stuff. It has been demonstrated that focused ultra high frequency UHF electromagnetic energy beams can be used to induce considerable agitation and muscular activity or induce muscular weakness and lethargy. Microwaves can also be used to burn human skin and aid the effect of drugs, bacteria, and poisons, or affect the function of the entire brain. These effects were all revealed at length by the CIA on September 21st, 1977, in testimony before the Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who directed the MK Ultra program at that time, was forced to discuss the scope of the CIA's research to find techniques of an activation of the human organism by remote electronic means. So this is something that exists right now that has been pursued to its highest degree that can be used from space to reach any person, any place on the face of the earth. End quote. Now,
that makes my butt pucker, to be quite honest.
Yeah, we've talked about
Like-
Project MK Ultra, and the thing about Project Bluebeam is there are things in here that are true, but I wanted to read a lot of these excerpts because if I just say this is what it is, it doesn't really do justice to what this guy's actually saying. You know, you need to hear it in his own words. Now, I'm doing just excerpts. There's a lot of stuff I'm skipping over for his essay, but I just wanted to sort of get the flavor of it and what he's doing. So he's actually referencing real things that we did an episode on Project MK Ultra, and as you say, ETA, it does make your butt pucker what what they were trying to do.
Also, not just like, because there's a little bit of information that we know about some of these programs. We know that they actually existed, and there is some truth there. But what about like, I always think about what we don't know. It's when people talk about like the technical sophistication of, say, for instance, like our Air Force or something like that, or, when people talk about like experimental aircraft. I'm sure there's plenty out there that we've never seen that, or any kind of technology that the government might be in possession of or have developed. Who knows what the hell is out there? I mean, your imagination will go wild with this stuff because we just don't know. We may never know, or it may take quite some time for a lot of this stuff to come out. Like certain technologies, as is tradition, right?
Yeah.
It's like what are they capable of doing that we don't know about? I have to think or presume that there's probably some pretty serious technology that our government is in possession of that. They just, it's just not out in the public eye, so we don't know about it. But if this thing has any kind of like potential, then the government. I mean, there's untold trillions of dollars are missing from the government's budget. So I mean, who knows what that's being spent on. To me, that's like a really big red flag when it's been proven that there are trillions upon trillions of dollars that are missing from the budget, and you see how much. I'm not sure what the current debt level of the American government is, but it's trillions upon trillions. I know that. I know back in what was it like? I think when 9/11 happened, wasn't it already like $15 trillion or something like that? It's been a long time, so I might be wrong about that number, but I know it's substantial. It's probably, I think the last time I remember seeing something about it was like it's like over $25 trillion or something.
I don't know exactly what it is.
At any rate, that's just.
But the last time
I might be, don't quote me on that.
I don't know what the exact number is, but I remember the last time I looked into it, this is years ago. I was reading about it, and from what I read, it said that the amount per household was something like $70,000 per household. And it's like, you're never going to pay that off. $70,000 per household. Are you kidding me?
Well, and what I was getting at too is I remember that before 9/11 happened, there were congressional hearings about the missing money in like the I think it was the defense budget, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember like Donald Rumsfeld was, they were just sitting there joking and cracking jokes and, like just, freaking bullshitting basically. Like it didn't seem, I remember watching some of those hearings, because it was recorded for the public or broadcast to the public. And they didn't seem to be doing anything seriously. Yeah, they weren't taking it seriously. It didn't seem like to me. But I mean, what I'm getting at, my point, I guess, is that we know that there's substantial amounts of money, that is missing from the budget, or when they spend, like, for example, like $15,000 on a toilet seat for a government, facility.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's not really being spent on the toilet seat. That money's being snatched up by, like black ops programs or whatever, you want to call it.
Zork Manifold says that our deficit is 31.4 trillion. Wow.
God damn.
That is, I'm in the wrong business, guys,
Right?
How nice.
Dude, that's
how luxurious would a $15,000 toilet seat? What do you do to a toilet seat to make it?
Oh, it's not about what you can do to toilet seat. It's about what that toilet seat better be able to do to you.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Well, I'm guessing, so it has to be self-heated. It has to be like kind of nice and velvety and cushiony, but at the same time, it has to be made out of an exotic material like gold or something, or diamonds. Diamonds, yeah, it's got to be diamond encrusted. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows? That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that is an insane amount of money. Just freaking insane. Our
Yeah.
double.
That's like
Wow.
more money than actually exists, probably. That's a lot. I don't know how much money
I have
exists
no
in the
idea
world,
what those.
you know? Yeah.
I have no idea, but that's a big chunk of it, at the very least.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing about it too is that like most of that money that we owe, the vast majority of it, we owe to the Federal Reserve, which is a
Yep.
private entity that prints money for us. Somehow, some way, our government doesn't have the right to print its own money. I don't know. That's we've talked about this before, obviously, but
Yeah.
I still like to this. I can't wrap my head around it. Like why? Well, I know why. Obviously, control, but I still find it very freaking crazy that that's a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I always wanted to do another episode on banking stuff. We should do one sometime because there's so many things to do, like like what was it, like the 1908 crash that they engineered just to fuck with politicians to make them do what they wanted, or I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot we could do in the realm of the Federal Reserve, but let's get back to Project Bluebeam because
got off on a tangent there.
It is cold out here, and I would like to finish this episode at some point.
Oh,
okay. So the fourth step of Project Bluebeam will be, I guess it has 3 parts. Part 4.1. The first part is going to be a fake alien invasion. And this will be, I guess the point is to get nations to use nukes to fight back. And then because they use nukes, you could say, oh, that was naughty. And then you could use that to disarm them because they use their nukes on the fake aliens. I guess I'm not really clear on what that one's about. I don't know. And the second part of the fourth step would be, like I said earlier, okay, this is where they rapture the Christians. They suck them up with the tractor beam. I guess that's when this happens. And because the Christians would stop the NWO from happening, I guess. I don't know. And the third part is, here's a quote, "The waves used at that time will allow supernatural forces to travel through optical fibers, coax, electrical and phone lines in order to penetrate to everyone at once through major appliances."
Penetrate.
I have no idea what that is. I have no idea what that means. I'm just, so that's the third part, whatever it is. And I guess sometime around here, there will be an engineered economic catastrophe, and this will be used to replace all paper currency with electronic currency, like perhaps Bitcoin. Dun, dun, dun. Where's that suspenseful hamster or whatever?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that meme.
Yeah. Now,
classic.
This is my favorite part of the whole thing. So if some people decide to not go along with it, they go off grid, they don't want to partake, what are you going to do if you're living in the wilderness? Where's your food supply going to come from? You're probably going to hunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they thought of this. The NWO thought of this, and they implanted wild animals with microchips so that they can be controlled, and they can control the animals and prevent anybody who goes off their grid from hunting them. And
interesting.
How many wild animals are out there? How are they implanting them? How is this going to work? Wouldn't it be? Wouldn't it be
there's
way?
Plenty of air. Sorry.
Wouldn't it be way simpler to find the people who went off grid and just kill them than to implant every animal with microchips?
Yeah, you'd think so. And also, it's like there's plenty of hunters and outdoorsmen type folks out there nowadays still, and especially in some like, the Midwest or all over the place, really. But you'd think that they would witness this type of thing happening. Like it'd have to be a pretty damn big operation that, you wouldn't be able to hide that,
Yeah. All right. Now, the last paragraph or the summary of the whole thing is, the new technology is designed and built to track down and control people everywhere. This technology is being manufactured for a specific purpose, and to refuse to see and recognize that purpose, which is to enslave the entire populations of the world, is to deny the emergence of the Antichrist and the establishment of the new world order, religion, and government. If you cannot see, if you cannot learn, if you cannot understand, then you and your family and friends will succumb to the fires of the crematoria that have been built in every state and every major city on Earth, built to deal with you. No one is safe in a totalitarian police state. So, yeah, like I said, those are just highlights, man. This is some pretty wild stuff. But like I felt like I had to do some quotations from the document, the original document, because a lot of people have distilled this to its most interesting points. For example, the fake alien invasion, or what some people call a false flag invasion, which is sort of not really a false flag, but that's maybe splitting hairs. I don't know. But people use a lot of ideas from Project Bluebeam, but when you get down to the source, you get a completely different picture of what the original idea was, right? Now, so I didn't look into this, but supposedly Montsatt himself died of a heart attack when he was 51 years old, which is pretty young as far as, I mean, that's fairly young for a heart. It happens. It does happen, but that's fairly young. And some people around him, friends and family, also died of heart attacks at a young age. And a lot of people say that these are, basically hit jobs or NWO induced heart attacks, essentially. And this further fueled the conspiracy. But the reason I didn't look into that, because it would take a considerable amount of effort to verify that these people even existed, let alone how they died or if they are still around or whatever, So I just didn't have time to do it for this episode. But that's one idea around this. And that's easy to say, is that, oh yeah, him, his wife, his kids, they all died of heart attacks, strangely. And it would be very difficult to disprove that. You'd have to do a lot of legwork, legwork that might possibly include actually calling people up and asking, did your sister, aunt, cousin, whatever, die of a heart attack or whatever, And I don't want to be bothering people like that in getting those people's contact information in the first place, In other words, this is stuff that's not public knowledge. It would be a lot of work to verify. So I didn't go down that route because I just didn't have time, and I didn't have the inclination either. Now, if you're going to do a skeptical look at this, Montsatt doesn't provide any evidence for any of these claims. He just uses really vague wording. He sprinkles in some truth or some things that are related, like, MK Ultra. We know that's a real thing. So he'll sprinkle in some of that stuff, but he doesn't provide really any evidence there. So people will point that out to disprove him. Several dates for this thing have been proposed, have come and gone without really any incident. So it's one of these things where they've predicted several times now, it's going to happen on this date. And that date has come and gone, didn't happen. And I think that has been predicted again in the future. There's probably, one predicted for 2025, who knows? There's probably books written about it. I don't know. So it turns out that, or some people have pointed out that there's a strong resemblance between Project Bluebeam and a script for a Star Trek movie that was never made into a movie. I was going to say unpublished, but the script has been published. People are aware of it, but it was not made into the movie. I'm not sure how you would designate that, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Now, in this movie, there's a spaceship the spaceship is an AI remnant of a race from another dimension that comes to Earth and hovers over the planet and sends down fake people or holograms that look like prophets like Jesus and Muhammad. People receive telepathic messages of a returning God and stuff like that. It's very similar to what he said is going to happen in Bluebeam. There are some differences. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but you can see how it may have inspired Project Bluebeam. Now, most, if not all of the major themes of Bluebeam can be found in previous Star Trek films or TV episodes or just science fiction in general. And there's many parallels there. So deception using holograms, alien invasions, religious deceptions, all this sort of stuff that he's talking about. You just put it in a blender with MK Ultra and boom, you get Project Bluebeam. So that's kind of it. In my opinion, this guy seems a little unhinged, if you read what he actually wrote. And it seems sort of like either something he was kind of making up as like a science fiction kind of a story, or maybe he's sort of unhinged. I don't know. There are parts of it that are compelling, but overall, I'm not buying it. It's a little far-fetched, especially at the time it was published. I don't think we would have had the technology to do this sort of thing. Probably still don't today to do this sort of thing on a large scale. Although, like we're saying, Project MK Ultra, I mean, they were trying to do mind control, the Manchurian Candidate, all that stuff. And I saw in the news not too long ago, we had a bunch of shootings back to back, and they were of people who did these mass shootings who don't fit the typical profile that you see for a mass shooting. Like there was back to back, like a couple days in a row, like within the same week anyways, a couple of elderly Asian men shot up stuff in America. And I'm like, elderly Asian men, that's not your typical demographic for mass shootings. It was just weird. It's, if you look at the mass shooting cases, I don't remember any of them in the United States anyways being Asian. I don't know. Kind of weird.
Yeah. I don't know, but it's definitely a weird thing. And you could see like the motive that, may be in play here. Like, for example, if you wanted to de-arm a population, you could have, it's like similar to what happened in Australia. After a mass shooting, they used that as an excuse to, mandate that people had to turn their guns, So, I mean, the benefit is obviously there. If you have an unarmed population, you have that much more control over them. So,
yeah,
who knows what tactics are being used to that end.
I'm not familiar with that particular incident, but I mean, it sounds interesting. I'd like to look into it. But yeah, that's the thing. I think that's why it's still around today, is because there are a lot of themes in here that people can relate to or identify with, and with especially these religious themes, I think that appeals to a lot of Christians and kind of draws them in. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I'm just, I think it's a bit much, What do you think of Project Bluebeam there, ETA?
It would be quite the thing to accomplish. Like I said before, the amount of resources, the amount of people that would have to be involved in it in order to accomplish something like this would be just out of the realm of possibility, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And some of it, like you were saying before, some of the stuff that he mentions is compelling and actually kind of does make some sense and has come to fruition. Like, for example, the digitalization of currency. That's currently happening. It wasn't happening back then when he first put this out.
Well,
right. So that is kind of one of those things where you have to kind of stop and think. It was beginning, right?
It kind of was. So we're not cryptocurrencies, no, but digital currency in the sense that, most dollars were imaginary and stored on computer ledgers rather than actual paper currencies. So it depends on how you look at it. But back then, they were doing what you might consider digital currencies. But then again, you might also be like, oh, he was totally predicting cryptocurrencies. I don't know. Maybe he was, That's the thing. There's a lot in there. It's like Nostradamus, where it's vague enough. He's not specific about any of it. He didn't say cryptocurrencies, which is a very specific thing. Cryptocurrencies is it's a decentralized currency. So it's like the opposite of what he's saying. What he's saying is a centralized digital currency that one government can control. Cryptocurrencies, or most of them, are decentralized. Bitcoin in particular is not controlled by any one entity, and it's designed to be that way on purpose. It's not controlled by any one government. There's no developer. There's nobody out there who has total control over Bitcoin. So it's sort of like that. It's like I said, like Nostradamus, he made these claims that you can apply to a lot of things, but he didn't specifically tie them to those things. But all right, well,
Yeah.
that
It just seems a little too far fetched. That's all.
was Project Bluebeam. It was a good one. It was a lot of fun, but I'm skeptical myself. Sorry, guys. I'm just not buying it. Anyways, let's get to the Betty Andreasson abduction.
Betty. Every time I hear the name Betty, I always think about Freddy Got Fingered.
Yeah.
The movie by Tom Green.
Jules, Betty.
Yeah. We live like kings.
Oh, that movie's so good.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste. You know,
Yeah.
Well, I think many people may not enjoy it.
Let me ask you something, ETA. Do you have a LeBaron?
I wish I freaking did. And I don't know what year that LeBaron was, but I would love to have one with a license plate that said #1 son. I would love it.
I don't see two LeBarons here. I only see one LeBaron, ETA.
I need a baby blue fucking topless convertible LeBaron. That's what I need in my life. I can't imagine those would be too expensive too. You know,
Yeah,
probably get one for pretty cheap.
Probably get one for pretty reasonable, yeah. But let's not go down that rabbit hole. We'd be quoting that movie all night.
Yeah.
Daddy, would you like some sausage? Daddy, would you like some sausages? All right, let's stop. Let's do Betty Andreasson.
We're about to go off the rails here.
Completely derail this thing. Yeah. All right. Do you want to get us started on the Betty Andreasson abduction here, Agent ETA?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very popular case. A lot of people know about it, and it's no wonder why it was suggested. You know, because it's a very interesting case, and it involves an entire family, but one woman in particular. So basically, the story begins on January 25th, 1967. So what basically Betty Andreasson, I keep on having pronunciation problems with that. I don't know if it's Andreasson or Andreasson, but at any rate, she, along with her family, were hanging out at the house in Burnham, Massachusetts, and they noticed like a flicker in the lights, and so she was there with herself, her husband, and her mother, father, and 7 children. Right?
No, her husband
was 7 children, right?
No, her husband was in the hospital,
and oh, that's right. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I knew as I was saying that, I thought I was like, oh, that doesn't. I don't remember that. But
he'd been in a really bad car accident, so he was not there, and her parents were there to help her take care of the kids and do all the stuff she needed to do and kind of support her because she was by herself there.
Yeah, 7 kids. That's a lot of damn kids. You know?
That's a lot of kids.
It's a whole heap of kids.
Yeah.
That's yeah. All right. So, anyways, so the lights flickered and went out in the home, and you know, her kids, everybody noticed it, but the kids got a little, I guess, like just, you know, scared by it for some reason. I don't know. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, to be quite honest. Like if the lights flicker in your house, why would you get scared? So as the story goes, they all kind of went into the kitchen, and, you know, the kids were nervous about, like, you know, the lights flickering off or what have you. And her father notices, now I've seen 2 different descriptions of this. I've seen that it was either a pink light or a red light. He notices like a red light outside the window.
It was a red-orange light, according to an interview with her that I saw.
Okay, yeah. So
red-orange.
Like I said, that's like
that sounds like
reading
pink
about
to me.
this. I've seen. Yeah, it could be. I mean, it's all kind of similar. So, you know, it's still in line there.
Yeah.
So he notices a light outside the window, and he looks out the window, and he notices like what he had described originally as being like a short little like Halloween characters, like people. He thought it was like people dressed up in freaking like a costume or something, right?
Yeah, he thought it was kids dressed up in spaceman costumes.
Yeah. So he notices that and doesn't really think much of it, even though to me it's like this was in January. So I was like, you know, as I'm reading about this, it's like, well, I would be kind of like, what the hell? Like, why? You know, why are people dressed up in costumes outside the freaking house here? That would make sense. It's not October, right?
Yeah, that would be.
At any rate, yeah. Go ahead.
I was saying, yeah, that would be weird. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be. I would take note of that, but I guess he doesn't, and you know, he didn't really do anything about it. So, the story goes that, in this whole story, by the way, that has been told, Betty didn't like tell the whole story at the time. She didn't immediately remember what happened, I guess, after it happened. And, none of the family members did either besides her what the father had seen. And also one of her daughters had recalled some stuff too, but not until like way after. So the story goes, like from what she described, that basically her whole family was put into a state of paralysis, like in a suspended state. And she had gotten taken onto like gotten abducted by these aliens. They had walked through like was it a wooden wall or something like that they had walked through?
I saw various descriptions, but yeah, basically, so her father saw them, and they bounced or levitated in a bouncing manner towards the house. And when they got there, they just sort of phased through the wall. Like they just sort of kind of came through the wall, like as if they were fading in and out of existence. And the creatures themselves had large pear-shaped heads. They were 3 to 5 feet tall. They had gray skin, almond-shaped eyes, holes for ears and their noses, with a slit-like mouth and a very small neck. And their hands only had 3 fingers. They were wearing blue, tight-fitting suits, and they had an eagle insignia on their upper arm. So that's sort of what they looked like.
Yeah, that would freak me out.
Yeah. But yeah, they basically just floated right through the walls.
Yeah, so they floated through the walls, came in, they had everybody like in a suspended state. They took Betty onto a what she described as like a classic like saucer, like UFO, They took her in there and they performed a series of procedures on her. And also she claims that they took something like out of her head that was already in there. And then she didn't like talk to him for a while from what I remember. And then she had like a lecture kind of with one of them that she described as being like the leader, or that she thought that it might be like the leader of the bunch because this guy was like this alien was a little bit taller than the other ones. But she describes like, because she's she's a very religious individual, and so she describes the whole ordeal as like a religious experience, and only later did she start like integrating like talking about it like these were aliens, UFOs and stuff.
Yeah.
But she says that, go ahead. You're going to say something?
Oh, yeah. I was going to say at one point I read that she said that they were actually Christians, the aliens, or that they worship Jesus or something. I don't know. But yeah, she seemed to have some very strong, religious connotations associated with this whole event.
Mm-hmm. So at any rate, she says that, let's see. I'm sorry. I lost track of my notes here.
Okay. Well, I'll talk about, there was one event while they were still at the house, before they took her away into the UFO, so she says that she got a sense of like peace and calm, and she felt that they were angels, and they communicated with her telepathically, but she was sort of confused about what they wanted. She couldn't really understand it at first. And they gave her like an image or a thought or whatever, and she thought that they wanted burnt meat. And that, so she went to the kitchen and she started making some burnt meat for them. And when it started to smoke, I guess they got a little startled or upset or something. And then they tried communicating with her again, indicating they wanted knowledge tried by fire. And she thought this meant the Bible. And she said, the writings of past ages had been tried, questioned, and survived, were filled with wisdom and knowledge, and sought after as food for body, soul, and spirit for hundreds of years. And she felt compelled to go with them, and she also floated through the wall. She doesn't know how, but she was floated through the house wall, or in some accounts, the door frame or the door or whatever. And she was floated onto their ship, which was like a classic flying saucer shape. And it also had large crystal orbs on board, which she was allowed to view by their leader, Quazga. Quazga. And I have this quote from her from an interview, and she said, the craft was silver-colored, saucer on saucer shape, had large cut crystal-like orbs, which I was allowed to view when the leader Quasga dematerialized the outer skin surface of the lower part of the ship. A smaller orb was at the top of a metallic stem. This same stem held the lower large orb as well. Two armatures, 2/3 of the way up the stem, held another crystal wheel that revolved around a clear tube filled with some gray liquid. There were 3 or 4 of these type machines in a circle under the craft. The craft had set down on a slight slope in the backyard, and 4 legs were adjusted somehow to level the craft. There were orange red lights pulsating from the ship. I don't think anybody else saw the craft the way it was parked on the small hill. Even my father, who was the first to see the beings come to the porch, would not have been able to view the vehicle, for he was looking out the front pantry window, not the back window. So that's just a little tidbit I have there, while she was getting on the craft or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So did you want to continue there? You said you found your place in your notes, ETA?
Yeah, but they're not great notes though, as is tradition. So she described the craft as being about 20 feet in diameter, and like Agent Anderson had said, the classic UFO shape, And she described that she felt that after she had got on board the craft, it joined like a mothership, like it went to a different craft that was much bigger, but she didn't really go into detail very much about that, from what I understand. So when she got into the mother craft, go ahead.
I say, there's some confusion on that. There's some, she did say that she felt that the smaller craft she was in moved, like it shot upwards, but also it's sort of like she's not sure if it's bigger on the inside, like the TARDIS, or if it actually went to another ship. She said she believed that she was actually transported to another place, not necessarily a ship, but it's, like you're saying, it's pretty sort of inconclusive. We don't really know. She's not clear on that part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's when she describes undergoing like a physical examination. And she describes like going under like a series of like bizarre tests is one of the words that I think she used. And some of these tests, like one in particular, like it hurt at first, and then but like the pain quickly subsided after the beginning of the test. And like I had said earlier, like she describes also having like an object being extracted out of her head, not put in. A lot of people, like when they describe UFO abductions and these type of bizarre events where they go under examination or they have procedures done to them, a lot of them describe being installed into them. But she actually said that she had something taken out of her head, which I actually find kind of interesting. That's not always the case. There's not too many cases where you see people describe that in particular.
Yeah.
So after the examinations, she describes being like talking to a being that she almost just like she kind of said she says that like she thought that like this was like an embodiment of God, right? Did you read about that?
Yeah, one of the creatures she met.
Like he tells her that she's the chosen one.
Yeah, she described that creature as the one, and she felt she was talking to God, and that creature told her that she was the chosen one. Yeah, Yeah,
I find that's pretty damn interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. You don't hear that in too many alien abduction stories.
No, you do not.
Yeah, so at any rate, after going through this whole ordeal, she's returned to her house, and she didn't she say like it was something like she thought it was like 3 or 4 hours or something like that. Of the whole event.
Yeah,
she's brought back to her house where she finds her entire family still like in a state of paralysis or a suspended state, and there was actually one alien that was that stayed behind, and she says the alien stayed behind to like protect her family, basically to make sure like nothing happened, or maybe to be a lookout to make sure nobody comes to the house or what have you, and notices that you have a whole family in their freaking kitchen, just in a suspended state. If you wanted to keep something secret, then you might want to have a lookout. But she says that like after this happened, or towards the end of it, they described to her that, hey, you're not going to remember this initially, but at a preordained time or what have you, you're going to start remembering this again. Because I think to me that sounds like if this is a real deal type thing, that they didn't want the shock of the event to immediately, they wanted to her to remember things gradually, so it might not affect her too badly, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of what I thought of that.
well, yeah, and she was told like you'll remember this when it's time, basically, when you're supposed to, you'll remember this.
Yeah. So it's kind of a funny thing too, because like most the majority of this information that she described, she only described, what was it, like 8 years later? I think, was it 1977?
Yeah, 10 years
when
later.
She had actually answered an ad. Yeah, she had answered an ad from Dr. J. Allen Hynek, actually, of all people, and he was basically putting his feelers out there for to the general public to see if there's any abduction stories that he could investigate. And initially, he didn't investigate her story. So, possibly he was looking for something different, But once they did start investigating it, was like a 12-month investigation, I think, and from what I understand, it was pretty thorough. Like
Hynek.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hynek did not actually investigate it. So yeah, you're right. I think it was 8 years later that she wrote a letter to Dr. Hynek. But he ignored it. There were certain details in the case that, he sort of didn't pay much attention to it. And then 2 years after that, she went to get a hypnosis section with Raymond Fowler in 1977. So 1975, she wrote a letter to Hynek. And then 1977, she was hypnotized by Raymond Fowler because she forgot almost all of it. But she remembered, the lights. She remembered the creatures. And that was it. She didn't remember anything else. Now, after being hypnotized, she actually recalled multiple other experiences, including before and after this experience. So that would be where that
going back to her childhood too.
Yeah,
right?
That thing that they removed from her head was a tracking device that they had implanted on a previous experience. Now, there's a famous book that was published by Fowler called The Andreasson Affair. And you can read all about this. I think he published like 4 books altogether about this thing or something, but he did some hypnosis and got some of those stories out. And that's pretty much like a condensed version of the whole thing. We left out some stuff. So they, like for example, they gave her a book, but where this book is, I don't know. And there was that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
There was that strange experience she had on the ship that seemed sort of like an acid trip. And there's a couple of other details, but I mean, that was pretty much in a nutshell. That was her abduction. And she has this whole religious association with it. And it does seem like her daughter Becky did some interviews and she remembers some of the details. And it seems like there's some corroboration, but on the skeptical side of things, some people have pointed out that her story has changed over time, and not just minor details. Like if you're telling a story many, many times and then, people are like, okay, we'll pay you for an interview to do your story. And you tell them, okay, well, oh yeah, it was 3 aliens. They're like, 3? That's all? 4 aliens? It was 4 aliens. Yeah. That's maybe a minor detail. I don't know. It doesn't really matter that much. But no, I'm talking about stuff like what the aliens actually looked like or things that actually happened during the abduction experience. There are significant differences between different interviews. Her story has not been consistent at all over time. So that's one thing that skeptics have pointed out to sort of poke holes in it. And in February of 2007, her son, Robert Jr., wrote an email that the whole thing was a hoax. And he said that his father was an alcoholic liar and his mother needed psychological help. So now who knows? That's not just him accusing her of lying is not necessarily evidence in and of itself, but it is sort of interesting to take with a grain of salt. Now, looking at this account, I do believe that she had a strange encounter but I wonder if she interpreted it in a way that is not necessarily what actually happened, you know? Like maybe the experience was so traumatic to her that, you know, she interpreted these beings as being angels and things like that. Or I don't know. This is a really weird one, and it's really hard for me to wrap my head around. And part of me wants to say it's all bullshit. She's just making everything up. And there's a lot more to the story too. So her second husband was also supposedly had experiences with aliens and was abducted and stuff. And
It was good old Bob Luca there.
yeah, he seemed to be not necessarily the most reputable individual, and seemed to be, he seemed to want to cash in on the whole thing. I'll just say that, you know, and she did make money on her story. You know, Fowler did apparently give her money for the book that he published and that kind of stuff, you know, Raymond Fowler. And there's a lot to this case, and I'm not 100% convinced that any of it is real at all, any of it's legitimate. But on the other hand, it does seem like something strange did happen. I mean, there apparently really was a power outage that night, and I don't know, stuff like that. So there are some grains of truth in the story at the very least that we can find, but it all comes down to these people's testimony. You know, I didn't see any neighbors who also saw a UFO or anything like that. This is not a case where you have multiple witnesses outside of the family, you know, and I didn't see, there's 7 kids, but I didn't see a whole lot of the kids other than Becky talking about it. So I don't know. This is a weird one where it's basically just 1 or 2 people's words, and you have to decide for yourself whether or not you believe what they're saying. What do you think about this one, ETA?
Yeah, you know, I'm right along there with you. It's one of the things that kind of stands out as far as credibility goes is that the only sibling that I ever heard any quotes from or what have you was one of her daughters. You don't hear anything from the father, not that I saw at least. And it's kind of basically just her saying this story and claiming it. And well, if that's the case, like you would think that like some of this stuff, you know, at least some of the kids you'd have some testimony from, you know?
Yeah.
It's a very wild story, a very interesting story, and it definitely piques, you know, the imagination, you know, to think about, you know, if this is true, what she went through, you know, would have been quite the experience, right? But there isn't enough grains of actual, there's no actual evidence. It's only the story that she's basically saying, you know? So like there's other cases where, you know, whether it be an abduction case or like a sighting of a UFO, what have you, and there's actual tangible evidence to be had in some of these places, you know, in some of these cases. But here, from what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, like there's no real evidence here, you know?
Nope.
It's an exciting story, like I said, but I just don't, there's not enough there for me to give it any kind of grain of truth, you know what I mean? To actually believe the story, you know?
Yeah. I wonder
I basically don't believe it.
Part of her experience aboard the spacecraft or the mothership or whichever it was, she describes what sounds an awful lot like an acid trip. And I wonder if, let's say...
And also, like, delusions of grandeur. You know what I mean? Some people, sometimes, you know, it's they come up with these wild stories and there might be a little screw loose, you know?
Let's just say that hypothetically, she went through an experience of something, right? Maybe she was abducted, but the experience was so traumatic that it kind of broke her mind. And the only way that she could cope with it mentally was to come up with this idea that it was a religious experience, you know, and that she met God and she was the chosen one and that kind of a thing, because this would be an potentially incredibly stressful or traumatic kind of a thing to happen to somebody. So that's one of the things I speculate about to myself is, what if this happened in a way that's different than what she describes, but it's sort of, you know, kind of messed with her head to a degree to where, you know, her mind filled in the gaps in a way that she could understand, a way that she can reconcile what was happening to her. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
But yes, all right, that was pretty much all we have for that one. And that's our double header or double feature. I think double feature. Header sounds like a document or something. I don't know. Maybe I'll title this one Double Feature. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Could we get
Keep it strange.